Welcome back to a brand new episode of Doors of the Universe podcast. Welcome all my fellow door openers. I have been missing for a little while. I've taken a little break. I guess it was October. I mean, it's only halfway through November, but normally we're trying to do at least one podcast every other week. But to be honest, I have just been in a slump. Kind of more needing to check in with mental health and everything, which has been helpful. That's something I definitely recommend. If you're struggling with your mental health, take the breaks you need. Be kind to yourself, be kind to other people, and be kind to yourself especially. And don't ever be afraid to reach out if you do need help. I'm lucky I've got a good circle of friends that I know I can always reach out to if I need to talk to anybody. If you don't, there are resources out there, and I highly recommend looking into them. It's coming into winter. Winter's a rough time, always. It gets cold, it gets dreary. I know I personally struggle with my mental health more in the winter than I do in the summer and stuff. Just not wanting to be outside, but luckily for me, I get to work outside, so I have to be out in the cold and I have to be out in the weather, getting fresh air and, but yeah, please keep an eye on your mental health. Check in on your friends. I know this is a tough time of year for a lot of people, especially with the holidays coming up too. Especially if you've had family losses and stuff. The holidays definitely come in a little harder. But yeah, now that that's out of the way, my spiel on keeping your mental check and health. What has been going on? The last episode I released was me doing a reading of Hot Frog by Edgar Allan Poe. If you haven't checked it out, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, go ahead and check it out. It's a story I enjoyed very much. Like I mentioned in the podcast, I think that I didn't really come into reading Edgar Allan Poe's work until later in life. But yeah, he has some decent stories that are worth checking out. And Hot Frog is one that definitely stuck out to me when I started reading Edgar Allan Poe. Besides that, Halloween happened. It's over. It's one of my favorite holidays, but Christmas is right around the corner, so we have that coming up too. But yeah, what else? Nothing major going on. I had put in for a day shift at work. That did not pan out, so I'm still going to be working overnights, which helps with the podcast because I have a lot of downtime at work overnights, and I'm able to edit and do things like that with the free time. But yeah, so I guess there are some positives that come out of situations that we don't necessarily think. You gotta find the positives, right? Keeps the hope alive. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's it. I had initially planned on doing this particular episode in October, and then October is when things started going into a bit of decline with the mental health, so I decided to take a little step back, and I shared the story, The Telltale Heart, which I did for the We Don't Talk Politics. I shared that as one episode, and then, like I said, I did Hot Frog for the other episode last month. So we're now coming to an episode in our series we've been doing on UFOs. This episode is probably one of the, I would say, even if you're not big into ufology or aliens or just extraterrestrials, all the paranormal and all that business, this would be one thing that is well known across the board, and that's Roswell, New Mexico. We're going to talk about the incident, the Roswell incident. Kind of give some differing views on it. I know us in the conspiracy theory, ufology community like to, but I lean towards that it was actual alien aircraft that was the crash there. Some people have other ideas. The government has said otherwise. After stating that it was an alien aircraft, they have stated that it was otherwise. But either way, that's what we're going to be digging into today. This follows, it's been a little while. It's been over a month, but the last episode we did was on the Mount Rainier sighting with Kenneth Arnold. And this was 1947. There was a large boom in UFO sightings. Some people say it was because of the Arnold sighting that there was more reported sightings showing up. Whether that be due to trying to get attention or whether that be to feeling more comfortable reporting a sighting. Because it was so prominent when Kenneth Arnold did his reports. But either way, you know what? Let's just dive into this. Let us get into the Roswell incident. So the Roswell incident occurred amid the flying saucer craze of 1947. On June 26, media nationwide had reported civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold's story of seeing what became known as flying saucers. Historians would later chronicle over 800 copycat sightings that were reported after the Arnold story was published. Okay, so yeah, we've got 800 copycat sightings, or people that saw the same thing that Kenneth Arnold did see. Which even in the last episode, we talk about how there were people reporting the same night, seeing the same thing that he had seen, and not being any way for those people to have contact with each other. So it kind of more solidifies the fact that that actually was, these saucers were visible. Whether or not they were alien aircraft, we can't confirm, but it was an unidentified flying object, or as we like to call them now, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. All right. So fast forward to July 5th, 1947. On a Saturday night, rancher W.W. Mack Brazel made a trip from his remote ranch to town, Corona, New Mexico. The ranch had no phone and no radio, leaving Brazel unaware of the flying saucer craze of the prior 10 days. As a result, it was not until Saturday night that Brazel connected debris he found 3 weeks earlier with the flying disc in the news. The debris, tinfoil, rubber, and thin wooden beams had been scattered across a square mile of the ranch. Brazel previously had gathered it and pushed it under some brush to dispose of it. When Brazel heard stories of silvery flying discs that Saturday night in Corona, he decided to gather up his prior find. On Sunday, July 6th, Brazel dug out the debris, and on Monday, July 7th, he took it to the sheriff's office in Roswell. The sheriff called Roswell Army Airfield, which assigned the matter to Major Jesse Marcel. Brazel took Marcel back to the debris site, and the two gathered up more pieces of rubber and tinfoil. Marcel took the material home on Monday night. And if you look on the Instagram and Twitter, there is pictures of Marcel, Jesse Marcel, with the debris. On Tuesday morning, July 8th, Marcel took the material to his base commander, Colonel William Blanchard. Blanchard reported the finding to General Roger Ramey at Fort Worth Army Airfield. General Ramey ordered the material flown to FWAAF, Fort Worth Air Army. Yeah, we'll just call it FWAAF, so it cuts back on. Which I don't know. I almost feel like saying Fort Worth Army Airfield is actually easier to say than FWAAF. This is the AAA. Either way, so General Ramey ordered the material flown to Fort Worth Army Airfield immediately. Marcel boarded a B-29 Super Fortress and made the flight to Fort Worth Army Airfield. On July 8th, 1947, RAAF Public Information Officer Walter Haut issued a press release stating that personnel from the field's 509th Operations Group had recovered a flying disc in quotation marks, which had landed on a ranch near Roswell. So on July 8th, 1947, we have our first confirmation from the Air Force saying they have a flying disc in their possession. So the many rumors regarding the flying disc had become a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Airfield, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. Decades later, Roswell radio announcer Frank Joyce recalled contacting Haut by telephone to verify the release. Recalled Joyce, "I said, Walter, don't run this story. If you do, you're going to be in trouble. They'll ship you out to Siberia." I remember mentioning that was a common phrase in those days. As soon as Marcel brought the material to General Ramey's office, both Ramey and his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, identified the material as pieces of a weather balloon kite. The FWAAF weather officer on duty explained to reporters that such ray wind devices were used at about 80 weather stations across the country. The balloons were attached to a 6-pointed reflective device that looked like a silver star. After launch, the balloon expanded with increasing altitude before bursting around 60,000 feet, with pieces then dispersing in their fall to the ground. Okay, so and now, what day is this? I guess it doesn't say what day that was. But, so now the Air Force, instead of saying we have a hold of a flying saucer, is now saying what you found was a weather balloon. So yeah, it was a weather balloon that would expand with increasing altitude, and at 60,000 feet would then burst. As described in July 9th, 1947 edition of the Roswell Daily Record, the balloon which held it up, if that was how it worked, must have been 12 feet, 3.5 meters long, measuring the distance by the size of the room in which he sat. The rubber was smoky gray in color and scattered over an area of 200 yards, 180 meters in diameter. When the debris was gathered up, the tinfoil, paper, tape, and sticks made a bundle about 3 feet, 1 meter long, and 7 or 8 inches, 18 or 20 centimeters thick. While the rubber made a bundle about 18 or 20 inches, 45 or 50 centimeters long, and about 8 inches, 20 centimeters thick. In all, he estimated the entire lot would have weighed maybe 5 pounds, 2 kilograms. There was no sign of any metal in the area which might have been used for an engine, and no sign of any propellers of any kind, although at least one paper fin had been glued onto some of the tinfoil. There were no words to be found anywhere on the instrument, although there were letters on some parts. Considerable Scotch tape and some tape with flowers printed upon it had been used in the construction. No strings or wires were to be found, but there were some eyelets in the paper to indicate that some sort of attachment may have been used. So on July 9th, Brazel told the Roswell Daily Record that the debris consisted of a large area of bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tinfoil, a rather tough paper, and sticks. He paid little attention to it, but returned later with his wife and daughter to gather up some of the debris. On July 9th, Marcel explained, "We spent a couple of hours Monday afternoon, July 7th, looking for any more parts of the weather device," said Marcel. "We found a few more patches of tinfoil and rubber. That day, it was reported that Brazel had reported the debris after hearing reports about flying discs, and wondering if that was what he had picked up, then going to see Sheriff Wilcox, where he whispered kinda confidential-like that he may have found a flying disc." Alright, so that is Mack Brazel. Which, can I just say, that is like, that's a tough name. Mack Brazel. It's not his real name. I can't remember his real name, but I looked it up. There was an interview. But everybody just called him Mack. But yeah, Mack Brazel. Farmer extraordinaire. UFO finder. UAP finder. So, basically, that breaks it down, the story of the majority of what was going on. Let's see. There's actually, I had a timeline saved here too. So let's do a quick little breakdown of that timeline. So June 14th, 1947, farmer Mack Brazel notices strange wreckage in one of his fields 30 miles north of Roswell. July 4th, 1947, Mack Brazel returns to the wreckage with his family to look at the wreckage. He hides it under a bush. July 6th, Mack Brazel reports the wreckage to local police, who inform the Army. The next day, on July 7th, the Army sends Major Jesse Marcel to investigate the wreckage. July 8th, Army Press Officer Lieutenant William Hout, releases a press statement to the media saying that the Army has recovered a flying disc. So July 8th, we're having that. July 8th, 1947, an Army press conference is held. The Army changed its story and says it was a weather balloon that had crashed. July 9th, the local newspaper front page reads, "Army reveals it has flying disc on ranch in New Mexico." So that's a quick timeline breakdown there. In come the conspiracy theories. It's not conspiracy theory if it's true. So after the initial newspaper reports of 1947, the Roswell incident faded from public attention for more than 30 years. When interest reemerged in the late 1970s, the Roswell incident was featured in films, TV shows, and books. Amid increasingly complex conspiracy theories, multiple hoaxes, and legends about alien bodies were incorporated into the Roswell mythos. The trend culminated in 1995's purported footage of an alien autopsy, which filmmakers later revealed to be a hoax, though they preferred the term reconstruction. So, 1978 with the renewed interest. In February of 1978, UFO researcher Stanton Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel, the only person known to have accompanied the Roswell debris from where it was recovered to Fort Worth, where reporters saw material that was claimed to be part of the recovered object. Marcel's statements contradicted those he made to the press in 1947. In November of 1979, Marcel's first filmed interview was featured in a documentary titled UFOs Are Real, co-written by Friedman. The film had a limited release but was later syndicated for broadcasting. On February 28, 1980, sensationalist tabloid The National Enquirer brought large-scale attention to the Marcel story. On September 20th, 1980, the TV series In Search Of aired an interview where Brazel described his participation in the 1947 press conference. They wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that, so all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who told the newsmen, what it was, and to forget about it. It is nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently. Brazel gave a final interview to HBO's America Undercover, which aired in August 1985. In all his statements, Brazel consistently denied the presence of bodies. Between 1978 and the early 1990s, UFO researchers such as Stanton T. Friedman, William Morrow, Carl T. Pflock? P-F-L-O-C-K. It's P-F-L-O-C-K. Pflock? Flock? I'm guessing this P is silent. We'll go with Carl Flock. Either way, was a CIA intelligence officer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, strategic planner, UFO researcher, and author of both fiction and nonfiction. Best known for his book, Roswell, Inconvenient Facts, and the Will to Believe. Alright, so back to what we were talking about. Mr. Carl Flock and the team of Kevin D. Randall and Donald R. Schmidt interviewed several dozen people who claimed to have a connection with the events at Roswell in 1947. Fast forward to October 1980. Brazel's story was featured in the book The Roswell Incident by Charles Berlitz and William Moore. The authors had previously written popular books on such fringe topics as the Philadelphia Experiment and on the Bermuda Triangle. Though he was uncredited, Friedman carried out some research for the book. The book's narrative holds that an alien craft was flying over the New Mexico desert observing U.S. nuclear weapons activity, but crashed after being hit by lightning, killing the aliens on board. A government cover-up duly followed. Historian Kathy Olmsted writes the book's narrative has come to be known as Version 1 of the Roswell myth. Berlitz and Moore's narratives was dominant until the late 1980s, when other authors, attracted by the commercial potential of writing about Roswell, started producing rival accounts. Let's go into the debris and the cover-up. The Roswell incident featured accounts of debris described by Brazel as nothing made on this earth. Additional accounts by Bill Brazel, son of rancher Mack Brazel, neighbor Floyd Proctor, and Walt Whitman, Jr., son of newsman W. Whitman, who had interviewed Mack Brazel, suggested the material Brazel recovered had super strength not associated with a weather balloon. The book introduced the contention that debris which was recovered by Brazel at the Foster Ranch, visible in photographs showing Brazel posing with the debris, was substituted for debris from a weather device as part of a cover-up. The book also claimed that debris recovered from the ranch was not permitted a close inspection by the press. The efforts by the military were described as being intended to discredit and counteract the growing hysteria towards flying saucers. 2 accounts of witnesses' intimidation were included in the book, including the incarceration of Mack Brazel. The authors claimed to have interviewed over 90 witnesses, though the testimony of only 25 appears in the book. Only 7 of these people claim to have seen the debris. Of these, 5 claim to have handled it. First mention of alien bodies. The Roswell Incident, 1980, was the first book to introduce the controversial second-hand stories of civil engineer Grady Barney Barnett and a group of archaeology students from an unidentified university encountering wreckage and alien bodies while on the plains of San Augustine before being escorted away by the Army. One aspect of the second-hand Barnett stories were described by ufologists as the one aspect of this account that seemed to conflict with the basic story about the retrieval of highly unusual debris from a sheep ranch outside Corona, New Mexico in July 1947. The book's authors, Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore, labeled the weather balloon explanation a cover story. They argued that the original debris, which they believed was from a crashed flying saucer, had been flown to Wright Airfield, later Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio, and material from a weather balloon was hastily substituted Although the book was widely disputed, it sparked additional conspiracy theories, as well as a number of hoaxes. Notably, in 1984, documents surfaced that were alleged to be classified memos concerning Majestic 12, MJ12, which that could be a fun one to do a separate podcast on, just go a little more into the MJ12, a secret operation launched by President Harry S. Truman to handle the Roswell incident. The documents, however, were later determined to be fake, and no evidence was found to support the existence of MJ12. This was followed by an alleged alien autopsy film, 1995, that purported to show the dissection of an alien corpse from the Roswell incident. A 17-minute video was later claimed to be a fraud by its director, or reworking, as we talked about earlier. Many alleged first-hand accounts of the Roswell incident actually contain information from the Aztec, New Mexico UFO incident, a hoax flying saucer crash which gained national notoriety after being promoted by journalist Frank Scully in his articles in a 1950 book, Behind the Flying Saucers. The hoax included stories of humanoid bodies and metals with unusual properties. In 1994, it was finally revealed that the balloon was part of the top-secret Project Mogul, which sought to detect Soviet nuclear bomb tests. Ironically, Berlitz and Moore were right about one thing. The government's claim that a weather balloon crashed at Roswell was incorrect. In 1994, the Air Force admitted that the recovered material was in reality from a U.S. spy balloon. Part of Project Mogul, it was an attempt to monitor anticipated nuclear tests by the Soviet Union. In 1997, a definitive Air Force report, the Roswell Report, case closed, ventured the opinion that some of the alien bodies may have come from civilian witnesses, who saw parachute crash test dummies, a severely injured airman parachutist, and charred bodies from the airplane crash during the 1950s. The report proposed that the witnesses consolidated the separate events, the Project Mogul materials, the crash test dummies, the airmen, and the charred bodies in their memories. For many ufologists, however, these explanations were seen as part of a continued cover-up by the U.S. government. So yeah, that's the basic breakdown of the Roswell incident and some explanations as to what happened at Roswell, or 30 miles north of Roswell. One cool thing I did find out after doing this is that the U.S. National Archive has a YouTube account, and you can go on there and watch. Well, they have a ton of stuff. But either way, there was a bunch of interviews. Some of the interviews, like I know we talked about it earlier, there was the group with Mr. Flock, who I can't pronounce his name, and all the other people who had been conducting interviews with witnesses. But yeah, if you go on there, the one that stuck out a lot was W. Glenn Dennis. There was also Jed Roberts, the person who received the report at the radio station that had happened. There was 4 or 5 interviews I watched regarding this, and listening to these people talk, they don't sound like they're out there. They don't sound like it's they're living in an alternate reality. There's some down-to-earth people that seem to had interactions with people that had witnessed it or witnessed themselves. But I highly recommend going on there, checking out those interviews. If you go to the W. Glenn Dennis one, it will the other ones will kind of pop up on the sideline of similar interviews. What do I think? What do you think I think? Of course I think it's a cover-up. No, yeah, it's just having the initial report being that, hey, we've got this flying saucer we've recovered, and then changing the report within a short matter of time after probably having higher-ups tell them, no, we can't report, that's what we found. And like I said, just listen to the interviews of the people. It just seems like And there was one person who was on there who was on the YouTube interviews that was also, he was there at the crash site with the archaeology team. I don't know. It just, I mean, I can see where it might seem like an easy explanation that, yeah, it was just the Soviet spy balloon, or the spy balloon, not a weather balloon. But I mean, even that, switching the story from saying it was a flying saucer to a weather balloon to a spy balloon, U.S. spy balloon. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of changes. The UFO, alien, UAP, extraterrestrial lover me wants to believe that this is a real thing. I don't think I mentioned it, but I shared a video on Instagram and Twitter. I actually got to stay in Roswell when I was moving out here to Portland. I took a southern route. It was about a day and a half or 2 days longer than if I had taken the short route. But route, whatever you want to call it, whatever part of the country you're from. But I had taken a southern route, and I got to see a lot of cool stuff. I took it intentionally because I figured there were a lot of things that I didn't know if I'd ever see again, get to have time to see, be able to go see again. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? But yeah, I got to see the Grand Canyon for the first time. I got to see Zion National Park for the first time. I got to be in Texas for the first time. I drove through there, but it was a small corner of Texas. But yeah, I got to see, and seeing the Southwest in particular was really cool. Like actually seeing like the painted deserts and stuff. Like it is beautiful. It was really scary because there was like, I don't know, 2-hour periods where I'd have no phone signal and I was just kind of out on the road by myself. Like I wouldn't see cars and stuff for long periods of time. That part was a little anxiety ridden, but outside of that, everything else was it was really cool. But yeah, the city of Roswell itself is definitely they have definitely embraced the Roswell incident as part of their culture. It's if you go in the city, you're going to see aliens everywhere. All the signage, statues of aliens. They have a McDonald's that is shaped like a spaceship, which is pretty cool. I didn't eat there because I don't really eat McDonald's. Just being vegan, there's not a lot of options. I could have gone. I should have gone on and get some French fries, I guess. But no, that was cool. And you'll see, like I said, there's pictures on. There's a little like picture video that Instagram helped me make. But yeah, they definitely embrace it. There's definitely got to check out the. What is it? Is it on this? No, it's not on this one. I was trying to see if it was on I got a sticker from there. The International UFO Museum, I think it is in Roswell. Definitely a tourist trap, but it's a fun tourist trap. I recommend checking it out if you're in Roswell. But no, it's I guess doing the more research brings out more information, makes you question it, but the UFOologists and the lack of trust in the information we're given by the government definitely has me leaning towards that it was a UFO crash. Were the bodies there? I don't know about that. I mean, nobody really brought that up. Later it was brought up, but either way, no, I think it's I think there was definitely a UFO. Was it alien UFO or was it just an unidentified flying object? Either way, I'm leaning towards a UFO crash there. But But yeah, what are your thoughts on it? What do you feel went down at Roswell? Let me know in the comments. Comment on one of the posts or something. Or email me. dotupodcast@gmail.com. I think Roswell is a very integral part of ufology. My girlfriend asked me the other day, is that a real science? Is that an actual... You know what? We're going to look it up right now because I need to know too. Despite investigations sponsored by governments, private ufology is not embraced by academia as a scientific field of study. It is instead generally considered a pseudoscience by skeptics and science educators. So UFOlogy is not an actual science. But it did say, good ufology should be science-based, but often isn't. I want to believe, right? Don't we all? We want to believe, have a good time, have something fun. But yeah, overall, yeah, I believe. I definitely lean towards the fact that this was an actual UFO crash. And another great government cover-up. But that's just me. Like I said, get a hold of me. Let me know what you think. You can reach me at dotupodcast@gmail. As always, I'm going to try and keep it short. Patreon's an option. If you feel like donating to this podcast, it would be appreciated. I appreciate it. There are a few more resources or tools I'd like to get to make this podcast better. Or Venmo directly at DOTU Podcast. Just make a mention in the notes that it's for the podcast, because I use that as my regular one. It's a nice little way to, I guess, spread the existence that DOTU Podcast exists. But yeah, the link tree is linktr.ee/DOTU podcast. That will have a list of all the listening platforms you can listen to this on. It'll give you a link to the YouTube, the Venmo, support me on Patreon, get an Amazon wish list, buy me something off there if you feel like it. I'm just kidding, but seriously. The TikTok, which is just a fun little TikTok. I never thought I would be on TikTok, and then yeah, I'm on TikTok as Doors of the Universe. Vimeo, Doors of the Universe on Anchor, which is who I make this podcast through, anchor.fm. If you're looking to make a podcast, great way to do it. Easy way to make a podcast and get it out there. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and also check out the We Don't Talk Politics podcast. We have not made a podcast in months, but the old ones are still fun on there, fun to listen to. Very similar format to this. I just have more time than the other two and am able to continue making my podcast. So that's the reason Doors of the Universe exists, because We Don't Talk Politics had a little... People got busy, and that life happened, as it always does. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it. Social media, share it with a friend. You got Thanksgiving coming up. You got to have that weird cousin that's into the same stuff you are. Like, right? We all have that cousin. But yeah, share it with family. Share it with friends. Share it with your grandma. Just get it out there. And I think that is it. And this is where we will end this podcast, because if we don't, I will keep rambling on. So I guess what to say. I was going to try and say go get some fries at the spaceship-shaped McDonald's, but apparently McDonald's fries aren't vegan, which I haven't had, so they called the vegan police on me. But it looks like your options are McPlant, which aren't available at that location, or oatmeal with no cream. So keep an eye to the sky and get yourself some oatmeal with no cream from the spaceship-shaped McDonald's in Roswell, New Mexico. Thanks for listening.